So I'm Susan Feldman, and this is Emma Rice. So this is our second time, right, that we can do this little talk. The first time was Brief Encounter. So the second time was the Red Shoes, right? Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about The Wild Bride, okay? So what is with all the dismemberment, Emma? In The Red Shoes, she lost her feet, and now in The Wild Bride, she loses her hands. So I know you love fairy tales.
I know, that's only the half of it, because in Rapunzel, the finger gets cut off. And I did CYMBELINE, and that's a decapitation. So I'm working through all the major body parts. I don't mean to. I suppose it's a fantastic metaphor, isn't it? I feel that as you go through life, we chop bits off ourselves in order to fit in, or in order to make something work. And sometimes that loss of a piece of you feels as physical as dismemberment. So it's not me, it's folk tales, but I think there is something incredibly true and powerful about that feeling of losing something that's yours. And of course the difference with The Wild Bride is it grows back, which is probably, maybe it's the end of the dismemberment, because there's hope, yeah, first time.
I think one of the things I love the most about this piece is the fact that it reminds me the most of being a child and having fairy tales read to me, and it being scary. And here's the cast.
Oh, yes, Patricia Kuliawska. And Ian Ross.
No, it's fine. So this idea that it really is a fairy tale, and you say it's a fairy tale for adults. So can you talk a little bit about, and this one is not, this is based on, there's the handless maiden, there's the girl without hands. That this seems to be a...
There's lots and lots of different versions that work around the notion of the wild woman with no hands. The version that I primarily worked from was in a fantastic collection of stories called Women Who Run with Wolves, which have been collected by a brilliant woman called Clarissa Pinkola Estes. And it's really about the female journey through stories. I love it because it's very much come from the oral telling. I'm not a great believer in the Hans Christian Andersen and the Grimm's versions, because they've very much been sort of stolen and documented, I feel, as opposed to told. And that's all this is. It's another telling of a story that somebody else will tell at another point, somebody else will change. And these stories, that's really where their power is how they mutate to our understanding of the world and our understanding of ourselves. But all these stories are for, I mean, I don't really ever prescribe who they're for. I make work for myself. I just think that they're, one of the things we like to say is for adults and brave children. And really it's a way of marketing it, because you don't want to stop anybody from coming. You don't want adults to think it's a children's show, because these issues are really, certainly this show is very much about a long life and endurance, which is quite a mature theme. But children love these stories. And they're not as scared by them as we are, and they're not as haunted by knowledge as we are, and they will remember them at times in their lives when they need them. I'm a great believer that you have a bank of narratives that when you want them, you suddenly remember what it is to dance too long in your red shoes, or what it is to feel the terrible loss of something. And you know, and one day you also feel what it's like to wake up in the morning and for it not to hurt so much. So I think these stories really speak to us on an incredibly fundamental level. Come on, there's more actors. Come on. Stu Goodwin, Damon Dono.
Would you like to talk about how the pieces, how you and Kneehigh devise a piece, and how the music in particular comes in together with the story?
How long have we got? A while, it takes a while. There's no formula. Really, the key moment is when I decide which story I want to tell, and the really key moment is realising why I want to tell it, because that really will be the compass that guides you through all the many, many possibilities there are. Simply, what I do with my creative team, i.e. composer, designer, writer, is we start talking a lot about the world and the themes and some of the knowns about the show, and we build up what I like to call a palette. But I always think it's like landing planes. So I might ask the writer to write a collection of poetry about devils and fathers, for example, or daughters and apples. So you start getting some words, but they're not narrative. You don't know where they're going to go. And I talk to the designer about what this world might be, and we end up talking about Robert Johnson, and we talk about the crossroads. And the tree that Robert Johnson sold his soul to the devil under still exists. There are photos of that tree, and that's our version of it. So you start building these worlds, and with the composer, I start thinking, we talk about the blues, and we talk about the earthy themes of it, and I say, write me the theme of, again, the father and the daughter. So you're building up a collection of planes, and they're beautiful planes, but you don't know how they're going to land. You have no idea what order they go in. And then you bring together the most fantastic, diverse, surprising, talented group of people that you can find, and you bring them into that world. And if I do my job well, Andrew Durant. If I do my job well, then people begin to understand where I'm coming from, what my interest in the story is, and they start to bring their humanity, their experience, their skill, their brilliance into the room, and we start to develop what I call the collective imagination, which is so much greater than any single imagination can be. So people start having ideas, people bring work, I send people away to work on dance, to work on music, to work on songs, to work on duets, and I start using that genius and crafting it into a story. And I don't really know how it happens. You start at the beginning of the day and keep going. But with a team like this, who you must talk to, because everybody will have a different experience, there is a wealth of riches. You don't ever have that moment when there's nothing happening, or an awkward silence, or grumpy, you know, that awful thing which I associate with scripts, when people sort of rub their heads and look at a piece of paper. We never have that, because we sing a song, or we make some dinner, or we have a dance. You know, that there's a very good energy that goes through a good process.
So let's talk to some of the actors. Patricia.
In a particular question?
Yeah, well, Patricia was the girl in the red shoes.
You saw the show. Brilliant! Thanks for coming back.
So how is it similar, and how is it different to work on this show?
This is my fourth show with Kneehigh Theatre, and for you who have seen the red shoes and remember me without hair and going through the quite durational process of exhaustion, and I don't know, both of the shows are actually kind of about duration and survival, I think, as well as about woman power, I suppose. Difference between the red shoes and this one is that the red shoes was conceived 10 years before, in fact 12 years ago, and I had to step in to the role created before. By the time of doing it, I inhibited like it was mine, and I forgotten about it, that somebody created it before me. I felt like I put the stamp on it. Whereas with this show, I felt like I'm creating something from the very beginning. Although The Wild Bride had a different life many years ago. Emma had made a show in Hungary, which was totally different, and I don't know if I may say that you weren't quite happy with it and quite satisfied, and you wanted to revisit the story and with different people. So I felt like I could start from scratch, from something very new. I don't know, it's a fantastic journey, but it's like the Red Shoes. I felt like it was the journey which had the beginning and the end, and this one too, but my bit is obviously in the middle. So it's the character which is carried with three women, you know, we are all one.
Beatrix, you're often
I'm not just the only woman in the cast.
She often mutters under her breath when she takes over from Audrey, "Now is the beginning." The act one starts.
That's very cruel jokes, obviously jokes only.
So I wanted to ask Audrey. Audrey, you obviously sing some of the most beautiful music in the show, which is really stunning. And I wonder how much you brought of that to the process, and how much was given to you by the composer, would you say? How did that work?
Well, I believe that one of the reasons I got the job in the first place was perhaps because of my voice, and maybe, and I think it was a bit of both. I mean, Stu Barker wrote some songs that were allocated to me, and then I remember the moment with the switch between the second and the third woman, when I suddenly sing very freely and very loudly. Poor Patricia, she thinks I sing too loud. I remember me actually goofing around and just going mental and just singing for the sake of singing, just making a joke, and Emma just going, "Yeah, try it, add it in the show." Okay. So yes, I think sometimes it was accidental. And to be honest, I think I discovered that part of my voice at the same time as we created Kneehigh. I wasn't, because I'm classically trained, so that more, I don't know how you call it, earthy, Eastern European type voice is new. So thank you, Kneehigh.
I think it's important to say that you've been calling this sort of the Balkan blues, right? So you did it.
Fluff coined this phrase. Sorry, Ian, I'm not supposed to call him Fluff in public.
Although you do. Yeah, Balkan blues. Stu's really into Eastern European sort of harmony and rhythm. So there's a lot of things in seventh in this piece, and a lot of harmonic minor, if that means anything to anybody. But starting on the dominant, if that means anything to anybody. So yeah, really sort of European feel to a lot of what he writes, but then you sort of layer on top of it the genre of whatever, you know, in this case blues. So if you deconstruct like the Crossroads, the main tune, then that's very much sort of Eastern European harmony in there, you know? And then we just chuck in a load of bluesy stuff, slides and harmonicas and you know, show off sort of singing and stuff.
we do as a sort of general company, we disregard all notion of rules and forms. I mean, really, anything goes. There's never a conversation, is there, about whether anything's appropriate or right or true to any form. It's just what happens is what is.
Yeah.
But Balkan blues is a good handle.
Balkan blues, I think that sort of covers it. Yeah, because there's the influences from the rhythms and the techniques that we're using and the instrumentation as well. I think there's a lot taken from Europe there, you know, and then smashed together with a bit of America as well.
I mean, one of the exciting things that's happening for us in our exchange with Kneehigh, now that we've done 3 shows and Berkeley Rep's done, they brought you back a couple of times, and I'm sure there's going to be more touring of a couple of other projects. So one of the things that's starting to happen is that there are now some Americans joining the company that is growing in number. And so I wanted to ask the two American guys, Andrew and Damon, a little bit what it's like for you working with Kneehigh.
It's fantastic, really. It's refreshing spending so much time in the New York commercial theater scene to find people that are, you know, actually doing theater for the reasons that you started doing it in the first place. Yeah, it's great. There's just a lot less rules and regulations and things like that. It feels more like a family and like a home, which is why I started doing it in the first place. And but it also creates you know, it's a challenge sometimes. Like for this show, Stu McLaughlin, who played the devil originally with everyone in the UK, couldn't make it over, and so Emma asked me to do it. But I had like a day and a half of rehearsal with just Emma and I before the rest of the company, who has done the whole show together, you know, for 8 months before they all came in. And so it was a lot of pressure and very scary, but they were all very welcoming and wonderful. And I'd just say it's very an enlightening experience.
Did you feel like you were able to make it your own?
Yes, definitely. Very much so. Yeah. Because you kind of have to, or nothing will happen. You know, it's like...
I mean, you're very different from Stu.
Yeah. And I just had to come in with my ideas and come in strongly, you know, because if you don't come in strongly, then it's more difficult to work with, I think. It's good to have big, bold ideas where you know, and you're not afraid of falling on your face, because all these wonderful people are there to catch you and, you know, lift you up and say, oh yeah, that's great, do that, or let's do this. It was fun. It was a lot of play, and it was a lot of figuring out. And I think it was refreshing for everyone else too, to get to, you know, have a new energy with it. So it's really fun.
Damon?
Yes, indeed. I thoroughly second all of that. Yeah, it's a bit like joining the circus, which is the greatest thing ever. And thoroughly amen to the refreshing element of New York working in such a way, and then getting to sort of jump into this absolutely gorgeous bunch of lunatics in the most brilliant way ever. And then the circus, you know, is no slight. The circus people are extraordinarily talented and sharp, and so I was trying to explain to Ian, I think, the Sandlot. It was almost like I felt like I was in the Sandlot, in that, like, everybody's got their thing, you know, but we're this ragtag group of genius children, and and so I felt so grateful to be swept up and thoroughly welcomed and appreciated. It really helps, like, it gives you a sense of self. It helps you believe in yourself and then what you're doing as well, and thoroughly challenges you and thoroughly inspires you, and it makes you want to be a better man. Quite literally. And so, and then just sitting there, you know, me personally, my track was you know, by and large musically based, and so sitting next to Ian all day, you know, during this rehearsal process was just the most joyous, magical experience ever. And then, but Emma, so generously, and generosity, you know, we talk about that a lot. I mean, that's kind of the manifesto of Kneehigh, is just this generosity thing, sort of check it all at the door and let's just go play, let's share, give, and don't be afraid to give again when you fail, and all of that. And that builds up such a glorious resolve and openness that we totally share together. We show up hours early and play games with each other and, you know, sing stupid songs. And but Emma as well has this unbelievable knack for sort of drawing what's particularly unusual or special about a person out of their nose, and then just put it up in lights, and do that with like 7 different people, and you have this extraordinary collage that you never saw coming, And it's just terrific to be a part of that.
For those who saw Brief Encounter, Damon did that gorgeous solo of Go Slow Johnny. Do you remember that? When they're in the boathouse? It's quite a beautiful song. And so Stu, I wanted to tell you something. The first night or the second night when I was with some people and they saw it when you all came out for the curtain call, they said, oh, there's only like 6 of them. I thought there was like 12 people on stage. So you do play a lot of people. So
Only 2.
Only 2?
Only 2.
No, isn't it 3?
I don't know, is it 3?
I've got confused now.
It's just 2. The father and then the prince.
But it seems like you go through quite a lot up there.
Well, of course, you're right.
Because you're a soldier.
Yes,
right?
the prince starts his journey and as a certain thing, and we're still working on that since we've come here. Emma's constantly tweaking things, just throws things in for us to think about, and so she's nudging me in slightly different direction. But I seem to get an arc in each scene, and it's a big arc, and it happens quite quickly. From the moment I come in, I'm counting pairs, mother, and then I see this creature, you know, and I'm in love with her in a second. So that's quite a leap. And then it seems all blissful, and we're in love, and so on. And then there's war. So then it's another big leap, and I enjoy that. And a friend of mine asked me, how do you navigate through all that? And I simply say I play this scene from the start to the finish of that scene, and no more. I don't think about what's coming next until I get there, and then there's another change. So in a sense it is different characters. It's broad and it's bold, changes each scene. So you're right in that sense, but I embrace that. It's wonderful. It means I don't have to carry that nonsense of I must gradually take this character somewhere. It means I can just leap and hope that you're with me, boom, he's at war, and it's an absolute revelation to be with this company. I've never experienced anything like this apart from during drama school training. We got to work in an ensemble with the same people for 3 years, and I thought that was incredible, and then going out into the industry, it's nothing like that. So coming here, and like Damon says, Emma looks for the thing she can pull out of you that's particular. And that feeling of somebody's noticed something in me and they're pulling it out, rather than giving me something to put on, is so refreshing. It means I'm with myself and not having to plaster things on.
How did you get to Kneehigh?
By complete accident. I had, very briefly, I had stopped acting in 2007. I'd kind of done some good stuff and I really enjoyed what I was doing. But I had a young family, and my family and I wanted to explore some other things. And it meant us moving away from London, and we travelled around Europe, visiting organic farms and eco-villages, and we were going to buy a plot of land somewhere in Europe and kind of set up a homestead and start putting our hands in the earth. And we sort of did this journey and it ended up back in England. But we found the piece of land. We were sort of drawn towards this piece of land, and we sold our house in London, bought the land, and made the plan to break the land and get animals on there and so on. And then a casting director, friend of my wife's, who used to be an actor also, rang me and said, I got this job here, it's got your name all over it. I said, well look, I'm not doing that anymore. She said, I'll just send it across to you, you see what you think. And there were 2 jobs. There was this job and then another job, a retelling of Cinderella, Midnight's Pumpkin, in which I was to play the father of Cinderella character, and also the manservant to the prince. And the description of the manservant to the prince was to be a sort of host, and welcome people in. And then I said to my wife, I think I'm going to go and meet this lot, because I've heard of Kneehigh, I've not seen it, and a very good friend of mine had done quite a few things with him. And she did punch me rather hard. You bastard, you're going to leave me on you. I don't know, and I met Emma, and we sort of bumped into each other in the lift going up to the meeting room, and almost immediately we sort of knew, didn't we? It was like, oh, yeah. And the one thing she said, which clinched it for me, was, I got these 3 feisty women, and I need a guy to stand up and kind of, you know, get a grip and get on board. She did. She said they're wonderful, beautiful, sexy, feisty women, and I thought, I'm having a go at that. I can't tell you what a joy it has been to get to know them and get to know myself with them. And how could you resist?
So
working with this and these.
Yes, hello. Hi. So how did you come into this show?
Well, originally I met Emma through trying to find dancers for her for a workshop she was doing for Umbrellas of Cherbourg. And after I'd given her a couple of dancers, and one of them turned out to be, then was in the show, I wrote an email to Emma saying, I think you're fantastic, I'd really like to work with you. And she sent me an email back saying, well, let's make it happen. And then about a month later, she emailed me and asked me if I wanted to do the movement on Umbrellas of Cherbourg. So that was my first job with Emma and Kneehigh. And then from that point onwards, she asked me to do the movement direction for Midnight's Pumpkin and Wild Bride. So that's how I became originally involved. So I was just doing the movement on it, and I absolutely loved it. And I loved the process and the fun, and being in the barns, which is where Kneehigh rehearses in Cornwall, which is right by the sea. You know, everybody stays together, eats together while you're rehearsing, and it's an amazing process to be involved with. And watching Wild Bride sort of come together was so amazing, and it's really dear to me, and that kind of work is really dear to me, because I work for another company called New Adventures, which is run by a guy called Matthew Bourne, and he's sort of famous for doing all-male Swan Lake and different versions of classical ballet. So that's where my background is in dance theatre. So I love telling stories through movement and dance, really. So I just fell in love with Wild Bride, really, and always secretly wanted to be in it, but of course couldn't be. And then Ava Magyar, who originally did my part, was unable to do Wild Bride, so Emma asked me, and I went, what? You're kidding me, really? I did, honestly, I was really shocked, because I think she took a real chance on asking me to do it, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I have absolutely loved, because it's challenged me. I'm just used to doing dance theatre, you know, so it's similar, but it's different. So I've really learned lots of new things doing this, and it's been an amazing challenge and process for me. And also working with all these people that I've seen perform and been on the other side, it's been really lovely to come into this side and be on stage with them all. I can't tell you how amazing it's been. It's been fantastic. So that's how I sort of became involved, and I've loved every minute of it.
We're always this happy. It's a bit like the Waltons, isn't it? We have had a really lovely time with this particular show, and this particular company has been very special.
Yeah, we've encountered people who were just
miserable.
miserable.
That was hideous.
So I'd like to open up the conversation to all of you. Thank you for staying. So perhaps you'd like to ask some questions.
It's all original music except for Ezekiel, the knee bones connected to the thigh bone one. That's the only, I'm right into it. And the Portishead, yeah, there's a couple of bits of found music on there. Yeah, so there's a couple of bits of recorded when the devil pulls the magic things out of the father's pockets, which is Les Baxter from the 50s, and Portishead is the war music. Everything else is originally composed by Stu Barker and then arranged and continues to evolve with Ian and Damon and his musical team. I mean, I don't know what to call it. It's certainly not musical, and it's not a play. So I suppose I'd call it music theatre, but it is what it is, really. And I think it is, and I don't know anybody else that works in the same way, working the music alongside the narrative. I mean, the musicians are with us from day one. There's no delineation, there's no difference in the way that the people work. You probably should talk.
I think you said it all.
And this piece is basically underscored the whole way, right?
And that really only comes when you have living, breathing. The tradition in Kneehigh is that we don't tend to work with trained musicians, and if they are trained, they leave their training at the door. So everything's learned by ear, everything's improvised, taught, developed. So it works much more like a band structure than somebody giving you paper. In fact, I always think it's funny that, you know, when you go to your average theatre show, you go in on day one and everybody gets their scripts or their music out and looks at it, and then by the end of the process, there are no papers. It's the opposite in Kneehigh. No, you don't see a bit of paper until the day before you start. And people are going, what do I say? What am I supposed to do? So we decide what's going to happen very, very late in the process.
And Patricia, how much of your violin, your violin playing is so beautiful.
Thank you.
So how much of what you're playing is hooked up to Stu and Ian and the rest of them, and how much of it is what you brought to the situation?
Well, I think mostly it's kind of composed by Stu. There are certain moments, maybe before the the switch between us, when there comes the violin solo before my violin are taken away. That's kind of what I kind of developed. That was the bit of a solo, which was then got established, and it's every night repeated kind of in the same way. Another bit is when Etta's hands are growing back, and that is kind of loose structure, which has got its kind of baseline, and we know what sort of mood and color we should kind of create, but it's still kind of every night it's slightly different, and we improvise on top of it. So it's a bit of both. I mean, the structure, most of the pieces were there, and then I put the violin on it, or I suggested what sort of harmony I can add with the violin, or you have done it. It's collaboration, I would say.
It's hard to quantify. It's hard to quantify, but it's like yogurt, I think. It grows. There's a culture that's a quote for the day. It's like yogurt.
Sounds like yogurt.
Well, that was the moment I knew I wanted to do the story, was when I knew I wanted to use 3 women. And so you have those. When you wake up and think, I want to do the red shoes, I knew they were all going to be in their vest and underpants, and she was going to fight the angel to the death at the end. You sort of, and in many ways, that's the why. The key reason that you can hold on to. And with this show, there's going to be 3 women, because no one woman. It's about change, and it's about endurance, and it's about how life is very, very long. So I always knew that was what it was going to be. It feels like the answers are all really the same, which is that we raggle-taggle everything together in layers. We work very fast, and so a lot of... So, for example, Stu and Audrey would be sent off. I'd say, you two go and work on things that father and a daughter might do together, and I'll send the devil off and say, go and work out some tricks that you might do up a tree, and I send everybody off and then come back, and then I say, what if you do that? What if you do that? And then Etta's there working, so I say, can you work out some steps. So really, it's like youth club at the beginning. Everybody's working separately, and I'm collecting and editing and pasting together, and it feels like it feels like a lot of the questions are similar, and the answer is it's about the cookery of it. It's getting the right ingredients, and of course there's leadership, and of course there's tunes, and of course there's words. But ultimately, it is the cooking part, the crucible of putting all this humanity together.
And how long do you spend together, would you say, to make a piece?
Well, that varies, but the hideous truth about this one is we made it in 3 weeks.
But then to this, it changes every day. We keep, and that was the beauty about it in the UK tour, is we would change city every week, and every week Emma would be there for the first day or two, and she would say, okay, well, let's change this, and the venue is different, therefore, you know, let's change this to make it work, and so in the way it's always fresh, because it's never the same, and you never kind of sit on your laurels, not Laurie, exactly. Yeah, it always changes. It always stays alive.
And that's true. It's flippant to say we didn't make this show in 3 weeks, but we started this show in 3 weeks, and then it was worked on today. So you saw things that nobody else has seen today.
But if I could add something to your question about like how we work, and am I sending us to the different corners of the barns or something? And I think like the barns, this magical place where when every show is conceived, it's basically a playground for adults, and it's magical because I don't think we as adult people have got many opportunities to play and be silly and reinvent the games, and you never quite know what are the rules of the games, and it's just lovely when we are set in the different corners to work or something, and then I want to nip to the toilet, and I just see people like trying to find different costumes, or just like running on the grass and doing obscure. I was like, what are they up to? And it's just like, it's ever so exciting. And then by the end of the day, then we share maybe what we were working on, and then we put things together, and it's brilliant.
Well, I cut most of Shakespeare's words because I couldn't understand it very well. I always start with the story, and I do the same with Shakespeare. I do find I'm not joking, I find Shakespeare phenomenally difficult to understand. And I get very upset when I watch Shakespeare plays because people are laughing, and I go, what are you laughing at? I don't understand these words. But anyway, so what you do is you crunch your way through, or I like to cheat. Wikipedia's really good, and study aids are really good. So you learn the story, and then you keep telling the story, and then you change the story. One of the things I do a lot, which is primarily laziness, is I read something or tell something, and then I don't look at it again, and I keep retelling it because, like Chinese whispers, it keeps changing. But that's good. That's exciting. I'm a great believer, sort of let mistakes happen, because those mistakes will lead you to something new. And we did exactly the same with CYMBELINE. I think we improved it. Because it's a mess, but anyway, but the critics did slightly differ, but that's a whole other story. The writer for this, Carl Gross, was in the room with us all the way through. So while other people are being sent into corners to dance or paint, he's writing. So that craft is very skillful and very precise, but it isn't happening before. I think that's the key difference, is he isn't the author prescribing who's going to say what. He's creating words to sit in the mouths of characters that are emerging, and also catching things that, Stu devised the Prince counting the pears scene. That was all through impro, and then Carl would write that up, and then there's bits of Carl in there and bits of Stu in there. But that, I think that's the key difference, is that this group of people didn't have something put on them. I love that. It came out of them and us.
When did you decide to have it rhyme?
That's a good question. I'm very partial to a rhyme because it tells you that it's not naturalistic. And the one thing about these wonder tales is they don't function if they become ordinary. It's one of the reasons the women don't really speak, is as soon as somebody says, that's a nice apple, everything crumbles, all of the power sort of vanishes, and you start thinking, where do they come from? And and I find naturalistic text tends to do that. So by putting a little rhyme in it, it doesn't half give a nice, it reminds you of being a child, it gives an energy to the words, and it also gives a real tautness. I don't know, I like it. But it's definitely got a childlike quality, hasn't it? Oh, completely different. There were 3 women in the other one. Almost. There was very little. I feel now it was never even. There's very little exists of it. So a lot of it is fragments of memory. It felt like a scrapbook of ideas. It meant I knew the story very well. The devil vanished as he does in most of the tellings. That he's very active in the beginning and then doesn't really reappear. So I worked on that much more. They were very, what I remember most, which I think is in the programme, is I had them, they were all very pretty, they were all like princesses. And that felt completely wrong as I get older. I thought I need to get some real women, you know, a bit sort of challenged in the beauty stakes. That's true, I'm always telling them to split their hair down and chop it off. But anyway. It was a completely different show, but it did mean that I knew the story very well, and I did wake up and think, 10 years later, God, I got that wrong, I got that so wrong, and that it was really, I wanted it to be much more brutal.
Well, see, another change that happened in the last month, I think, or in the last few weeks, is the devil actually taking away the voice of the women at the beginning. You know, when we all start speaking in our different languages, and then he goes whoosh, like that. And I think that is a very, very nice little moment, because it really brings the strength of the devil, showing that he took our voice, explaining perhaps why we don't speak until we have the strength, until the woman has the strength to actually just, and the power for herself, that maybe Etta can speak a bit more about.
What I find really interesting being a woman in this is that I see my life happen. It's happening, you know, at the same time, but I feel like I'm watching this life happen. And I know that each one of us has to go through this story for us to have our happy ending. So we're sort of being forced to go through the story. And that's what's interesting, and that's what I like, especially through the first half for me, is that I see the story unfold. And I know that it's got to happen, and I know it's got to be brutal, and I know that we've got to go through all of that stuff, because I know at the end it's going to be okay. And that's what I enjoy about it. So it feels necessary because of what the story is.
I think we used some sort of racial stereotype, because in England we always, we were laughing, didn't we, because the terrible, you know, assumptions that Irish men aren't very clever, and we've got a not very clever Irish dad, and that Scots, and a drunk, and that Scots are tight, and we've got an uptight, tight prince. I don't know, I like a kilt, I like dressing people up, yeah, I like dressing people up to look silly, and the kilt happened. We did, although I say that, I'm pretending like it all happens by mistake. We'd also, with the designer, I'd been looking a lot at African pictures of young African men who had hyenas as their, I don't know if you see, there's a fantastic collection of photos, and they're all wearing kilts and Nike t-shirts and got these dogs, and they were really sexy and wild, and that's where the kilt came from, but then he didn't turn into a sexy and wild. Later on you asked, oh, I'm insulting everybody today. So I don't know, I mean, you know, and accents are a great tool for comedy. It releases actors to transform and not constantly have to be tasteful and truthful, you know, useless words when you're telling a story and showing off. So I find putting somebody in a silly outfit. In fact, somebody once said that the way I direct is largely putting on a pair of glasses on them and saying, dance to that piece of music. Have you noticed our gender divide? Yeah. Always happens. I don't know what that's about.
Because we hate you.
Oh.
We started loving each other 20 minutes
Well, I
ago.
thought we needed a bit of dance. It's not all good.
But I loved all the facts and shots anyway.
Yeah.
Facts and shots. Love y'all together.
Right, we sort of get to watch the UK act out through Kneehigh.
Yeah, that's all the Celtic nations, isn't it?
It is.
All rolled into it.
There's a bit, but it adds a beautiful, it's easy to go with a song with the Irish and the Scottish. They're such lovely languages and sounds, so beautiful. And we tried different things, didn't we? And it was just getting heavier and dark. And you said, can you do an Irish? Yeah. And then it just sort of came out and lifted. And it wasn't until we went to Dublin to perform this that I thought, oh, feck. We're doing an Irish accent in Dublin. But they took it to their hearts, the whole storytelling, the music. It's much closer to them in Ireland, it seems, than in England. We've kind of lost a little bit of our tradition of storytelling. But they absolutely took it, didn't they? Ate it and, you know, embraced it. So it's lovely. It didn't offend anybody, which is a good thing, I guess.
I just want to ask Andrew a quick question. Did you make the decision to make the devil from the South?
I can't remember. Maybe so. I think, well, I saw the show in Dublin a year and a half ago or something, and I think I remember Emma mentioned that to me because I am from the South. And yeah, it was just something that I remembered she had mentioned, and then in reading the script, I thought the language really lent to a Southern accent, actually. And it's also the type of story that, I don't know, reminded me of a lot of old Southern tales, like Brer Rabbit. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but like, oh no, don't throw me in that briar patch, or like, you know, all those kind of old Dust Bowl stories, and it just kind of fit. It felt good, and it's like I mean, like we say, it's kind of easier to play a character almost if you have an accent, and one that fits it, you know, because a Southern accent can be very like seductive, can't it? But then it can also be very nasty and abrasive and deliverance, evil, you know. So
I think we started with, because his accent's so beautiful, I think we started with the accent, and then we discovered Mick Jagger, and that's what those were the two references. They did Mick Jagger.
yeah.
Okay, I think we have to stop.